At the heart of many of our repetitive, often destructive behaviors lies a single molecule, dopamine. It is one of the brain's most influential neurotransmitters, playing a central role in motivation, learning, and habit formation. Yet popular culture has misrepresented it as the pleasure chemical. In reality, dopamine is less about pleasure itself and more about the drive to seek it. It is the spark of anticipation, the itch to pursue, the restless energy that keeps us chasing rewards, whether or not those rewards ultimately satisfy us. The evolutionary origins of this system are clear. Early humans who were motivated to search for food, explore new territories, and pursue mating opportunities were more likely to survive and reproduce. Dopamine acted as the neural engine that powered this seeking behavior, making sure that the drive to obtain essential resources was strong enough to overcome fear, fatigue, or uncertainty. In the modern world, however, the same circuitry is constantly hijacked by stimuli far removed from the survival challenges of our ancestors. Dopamine operates in a loop that neuroscientists call the reward prediction error system. When you anticipate a reward, say the taste of a sweet fruit, dopamine levels rise. If the reward arrives and matches or exceeds your expectations, the brain reinforces the behavior that led to it. If the reward is less than expected, dopamine levels drop, signaling disappointment. But the most powerful spike occurs not during the consumption of the reward, but during the anticipation of it. This is why the lure of the next click, the next bite, or the next purchase can be stronger than the experience itself. The modern environment is saturated with dopamine triggers, engineered, in many cases, with precision. Social media platforms are designed to drip-feed unpredictable rewards. Likes, comments, and shares arrive at irregular intervals, mimicking the variable ratio reinforcement schedule that makes slot machines so addictive. Food companies create hyper-palatable products that combine sugar, fat, and salt in ratios specifically tuned to light up our reward pathways. Online marketplaces tempt us with flash sales and one-click purchases that promise instant gratification. Each of these experiences exploits the brain's ancient seeking machinery, encouraging repetition until the behavior becomes automatic. The problem is that the dopamine system does not distinguish between what is good for us and what is harmful. It learns patterns of behavior based on reinforcement, regardless of long-term consequences. This means that even when we consciously recognize a behavior as destructive, endless scrolling through social media, compulsive pornography consumption, binge eating ultra-processed foods, the brain can still compel us to repeat it. Awareness alone is not enough to override a system that evolved to ensure persistence. What's more, repeated exposure to intense dopamine spikes can change the brain's baseline state. Over time, the receptors that respond to dopamine become less sensitive. The same stimulus that once provided a rush now feels dull, leading to a cycle where we seek stronger and more frequent hits just to achieve the same level of motivation or relief. This is how habits solidify into compulsions and compulsions into full-blown addictions. It's tempting to think of dopamine as the enemy, but the truth is more complex. Without it, life would lose its color and momentum. Dopamine drives us to set goals, explore, and learn. It fuels creativity, ambition, and persistence in the face of challenges. The danger lies in an environment that overwhelms our natural balance, flooding the system with artificial triggers until our motivations are no longer aligned with our true needs or values. Understanding the chemistry of desire is the first step toward reclaiming control. By recognizing that dopamine fuels wanting, not necessarily liking, we can begin to question the impulses that drive our behavior. Is this urge a reflection of something I truly need, or is it a conditioned response to a well-designed trap? This kind of awareness does not break the cycle on its own, but it plants the seed of choice, the ability to pause, reflect, and decide whether the chase is worth it. One of the most persistent myths about dopamine is that it is the substance of pleasure, the neurochemical that delivers happiness straight to the brain. This idea, while popular, is misleading. Dopamine's primary function is not to make us feel good in the moment, but to make us pursue. It is the engine of anticipation, the force that drives us toward a goal, object, or experience, often with more intensity than the reward itself can justify. Imagine standing in line for your favorite meal. Your mind plays with the expectation, the smell, the taste, the satisfaction you are sure will follow. This is when dopamine levels are high, not when you take the first bite. In fact, once the food is in your mouth, dopamine activity often drops, replaced by other neurochemicals associated with satisfaction and satiety. such as opioids and serotonin. The seeking is what dopamine is all about. The pleasure is secondary and often fleeting. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Our ancestors needed a system that would energize them to search, explore, and act long before the reward was in sight. Anticipation kept them moving even in uncertain conditions. If dopamine were solely about pleasure, early humans might have been content to sit in one place, savoring whatever was immediately available, rather than venturing into the unknown to find something better. In the modern world, this mechanism has been expertly manipulated. Social media, for example, thrives on anticipation. You post a picture, then you wait to see who likes it. That waiting period, charged with curiosity and uncertainty, is a dopamine goldmine. Gambling works the same way. The spinning reels, the turning cards, the rolling dice, all build anticipation before the outcome is revealed. The actual result, win or lose, is almost an afterthought. The excitement of the possibility is what hooks us. This is why so many of our compulsive behaviors feel strangely hollow once we complete them. The binge watcher who finishes a season of their favorite show often feels a drop in energy or mood afterward. The online shopper who eagerly tracks a package might experience only a brief rush when it arrives. Dopamine sets us up for the chase, but the actual catch is rarely as fulfilling as we imagined. This mismatch keeps us in motion, seeking again and again. The danger is that anticipation can become its own addiction. The brain learns to crave the build-up, the tease, the almost there moment, even when the rewards are small or inconsequential. This is the neurological root of why people check their phones hundreds of times a day or refresh their inbox compulsively. Each action carries the possibility of a reward, and that possibility is enough to light up the brain's motivational circuitry. Dopamine's link to anticipation also explains why novelty is so enticing. New experiences, new faces, new products, all of these generate a spike in dopamine because they carry the promise of something different, something that might be better than what we have now. Yet novelty wears off quickly, and with it, dopamine levels drop. To maintain the same sense of excitement, we seek out the next new thing, creating a cycle of restless consumption. Understanding this dynamic is critical if we want to regain control over our choices. Recognizing that dopamine is pulling us forward not toward pleasure, but toward the idea of pleasure, allows us to question whether the chase is worth it. Are we truly moving towards something meaningful? Or are we simply feeding a loop that will reset the moment we reach the finish line? It is not about demonizing dopamine. Without it, we would lack the drive to pursue anything at all. But in an environment overflowing with artificial triggers, our natural anticipation system becomes overstimulated. We live in a state of perpetual, almost constantly leaning toward the next thing and rarely pausing to savor the present. Breaking this cycle requires a conscious shift in focus. It means noticing when anticipation itself has become the goal, and redirecting our energy toward experiences that deliver lasting fulfillment rather than momentary relief. It means learning to tolerate the discomfort of not acting on every urge, and finding satisfaction in the moment we are in, not just the one we are chasing. When we strip away the illusion, we see dopamine for what it truly is, the whisper that says keep going. It is a powerful voice, one that has carried humanity through millennia of survival and progress. But in a world designed to keep us chasing endlessly, that voice can lead us in circles, unless we learn to hear it, understand it, and decide for ourselves when to follow and when to let it fade into silence. Dopamine is a universal currency in the brain's motivation economy, and in today's world, certain industries have mastered the art of exploiting it. Among the most potent and accessible triggers are social media, pornography, and fast food. On the surface, these might seem unrelated, but at their core, they share a common mechanism. They deliver fast, intense bursts of dopamine that override the brain's natural balance, pulling us into cycles of craving and repetition. Consider social media. Every design choice on these platforms is engineered to maximize engagement, and engagement is, in essence, the pursuit of dopamine. Infinite scroll keeps the possibility of something new just one swipe away. Notifications arrive unpredictably, making each one a small gamble. Will it be a like, a comment, or something even more exciting? The intermittent nature of these rewards is no accident. It mirrors the same variable ratio reinforcement schedule used in slot machines, a system proven to be one of the most addictive known to psychology. Each new piece of content holds the promise of novelty, and novelty is a dopamine magnet. Pornography taps into one of the most ancient and powerful reward circuits in the human brain: sexual desire. From an evolutionary perspective, reproduction is a core driver of survival, and the dopamine system has evolved to make the pursuit of sexual opportunities intensely motivating. Digital pornography supercharges this process by offering an endless variety of stimuli, far beyond what our ancestors could have encountered in real life. With each click or swipe, the brain receives a new set of visual and auditory cues, creating repeated dopamine spikes without the natural limitations of real-world interaction. Over time, this can dull sensitivity to normal sexual experiences, rewiring the brain to crave the novelty and immediacy of digital stimuli instead. Fast food operates on a similar principle, though it targets the ancient survival drive for calorie-rich food. The human brain evolved in an environment where high-calorie resources were rare and valuable. Today, fast food companies have perfected the art of hyperpalatable combinations, the precise mix of sugar, fat, and salt that maximizes dopamine release. Each bite delivers a concentrated reward signal that bypasses the slow, subtle pleasures of whole, unprocessed foods. Add in the convenience and low cost, and you have a near-perfect dopamine delivery system, one that trains the brain to associate certain flavors and textures with immediate gratification. What unites these three examples is their capacity for rapid, repeated stimulation. The brain's natural reward system was never designed to handle this level of intensity and frequency. In nature, finding a new food source or a potential mate was a rare and effortful process. In the modern world, the effort is minimal and the rewards are constant. The result is a kind of dopamine flooding, where baseline levels shift and the brain begins to crave stimulation even in the absence of genuine need. Another shared feature is the way these stimuli bypass conscious deliberation. Social media notifications draw your hand to your phone before you realize it. Pornography sites are often navigated in a trance-like state, each click driven more by compulsion than choice. Fast food cravings can be triggered simply by the smell wafting from a nearby restaurant or an image in an advertisement. These cues tap directly into the brain's automatic seeking system, triggering desire before the rational mind has time to intervene. The consequence of this constant triggering is a cycle that reinforces itself. Each time we respond to a dopamine hook, we strengthen the neural pathways that make us more likely to respond the same way next time. Over weeks, months, or years, this can lead to deeply ingrained habits that are resistant to conscious control. Worse, the high-intensity stimulation dulls our response to subtler, slower sources of satisfaction. A home-cooked meal, a deep conversation, a walk in nature, making them feel flat by comparison. Breaking free from these hooks is not easy, because the behaviors they promote are not inherently irrational from the brain's perspective. The brain is simply doing what it evolved to do: seek rewards that promise survival or reproduction. The problem is that in the modern environment, the scale and speed of these rewards are unnatural, and the brain has no built-in mechanism for saying enough. Understanding the universality of these dopamine hooks is the first step toward resisting them. By recognizing the patterns, the unpredictability of social media, the endless novelty of pornography, the engineered bliss of fast food, we can begin to see these triggers for what they are: not just harmless pleasures, but sophisticated tools of manipulation. This awareness creates the possibility of choice, the space to decide whether the next scroll, click, or bite is really serving us or simply keeping us on the hook. The brain is not a static organ. It is in constant flux, reshaping itself in response to our behaviors, thoughts, and environments. This property, known as neuroplasticity, is one of the most powerful features of human biology. It allows us to learn languages, master skills, recover from injuries, and adapt to change. But neuroplasticity is neutral. It does not inherently favor growth over decline, or healthy patterns over destructive ones. The same mechanism that enables us to improve can also entrench harmful behaviors, especially when those behaviors are driven by the dopamine system. Every habit we form leaves a trace in the brain's wiring. At first, the behavior requires conscious effort. Think about learning to play an instrument or drive a car. Every movement feels deliberate. Every decision requires focus. But as we repeat the action, the brain begins to streamline the process, reinforcing the connections between neurons that fire together during the task. Over time, the behavior becomes automatic. This is the essence of habit formation, automation born from repetition. Dopamine plays a central role in this process. Each time a behavior triggers a dopamine release, the brain treats it as important and worth repeating. The more often this cycle occurs, the more firmly the neural pathways are cemented. Eventually, the cue alone, seeing a notification, passing a fast food restaurant, hearing a certain sound, can trigger the craving and the behavior, even before the reward is delivered. This is why habits can feel so deeply ingrained. The brain has literally rewired itself to expect and seek the stimulus. The danger lies in how easily this system can be hijacked. In a world saturated with engineered stimuli, social media alerts, on-demand entertainment, processed snacks, our brains are bombarded with opportunities to form habits that do not serve our long-term well-being. The repetition of these small, seemingly harmless actions gradually shapes the structure and chemistry of our brains. Checking your phone first thing in the morning, eating late-night snacks, or mindlessly browsing the internet before bed may feel trivial. But over months and years, these routines carve deep grooves in the mind's circuitry. One of the most insidious aspects of this rewiring is how it affects self-control. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making and impulse regulation, is in constant negotiation with the limbic system, where dopamine-driven urges originate. When habits are strong, the limbic system often wins, bypassing rational thought. This is why people can find themselves engaging in behaviors they consciously want to stop, such as scrolling endlessly on social media or eating junk food despite dietary goals. The wiring has shifted, and willpower alone struggles to override it. Breaking these entrenched patterns requires more than simply resisting temptation in the moment. It involves creating new circuits, new habits, that can compete with and eventually replace the old ones. This process is not instantaneous. Just as harmful habits are built through repetition, so are beneficial ones. Consistently choosing to engage in healthy, rewarding activities, exercise, creative work, deep social interactions, lays down fresh pathways that, over time, can dominate the brain's default settings. But rewiring the brain is not just about adding good habits. It's also about disrupting the cues and contexts that trigger the harmful ones. If your phone's constant pings pull you into compulsive checking, turning off notifications or physically distancing yourself from the device can weaken the cue behavior link. If late-night snacking has become automatic, changing your evening routine, taking a walk, reading a book, preparing herbal tea, can help break the association between certain times or moods and the urge to eat. Awareness is a crucial first step. Many destructive habits operate on autopilot, below the level of conscious awareness. By deliberately noticing when and why these behaviors occur, we begin to regain agency. Journaling, mindfulness practices, and periodic self-audits can bring these patterns into the light, where they can be examined and changed. Ultimately, habits are the architecture of our lives. They determine not only how we spend our days, but also the shape of our brains. Every repeated action is a vote for the person we are becoming. The good news, and the bad news, is that change is always possible. The brain will continue to rewire itself as long as we live, which means we can always choose to redirect its growth. But this also means that passivity allows external forces, algorithms, advertising, convenience, to shape us without our consent. Understanding that our habits are physically sculpting our brains gives urgency to the choices we make each day. We are, in a very real sense, building ourselves from the inside out. The question is not whether our brains will be rewired, they will, but whether we will take an active role in deciding the patterns they will follow. Escaping the dopamine-driven loop of craving and reward is not about erasing our natural desires, but about reclaiming control over them. The cycle is powerful because it operates on both biological and psychological levels. Each repetition strengthens the pathways that make the behavior automatic, and the more automatic it becomes, the harder it is to stop. But cycles can be broken, and the first step is to understand exactly how they operate. At its core, the loop follows a predictable pattern: cue, craving, response, reward. A notification appears on your phone, cue. You feel a surge of anticipation, craving. You open the app, response, and you see a new message or like, reward. The dopamine spike from the anticipation reinforces the whole chain, making it more likely to repeat in the future. Breaking the cycle means disrupting this chain at one or more points. One of the most effective strategies is to remove or weaken the cues. Dopamine habits thrive on triggers, sights, sounds, smells, times of day that tell the brain a reward is coming. If you can reduce exposure to those cues, you weaken their power. This might mean deleting certain apps, moving tempting snacks out of sight, or altering routines that put you in the path of triggers. Environmental design is underrated but extremely effective. By shaping your surroundings, you can make destructive behaviors less likely and beneficial ones more natural. The second strategy is to replace the behavior rather than simply resist it. Willpower alone is unreliable, especially when the habit is deeply ingrained. Instead of telling yourself not to check your phone, give yourself an alternative. Go for a short walk, write in a journal, send a message to a friend. By pairing the cue with a different, healthier response, you can begin to rewire the habit loop without relying solely on self-control. Another powerful approach is to change the timing and context of the reward. If you're trying to reduce social media use, you might schedule specific times to check messages, turning an impulsive behavior into a deliberate one. If you crave junk food at night, plan a satisfying but healthy meal earlier in the evening, so the urge never becomes overwhelming. By controlling the conditions under which rewards are experienced, you can retrain the brain to seek satisfaction in more sustainable ways. Mindfulness can also act as a circuit breaker. Many dopamine-driven habits happen in a haze of semi-consciousness. We act before we've even realized we've made a choice. Practicing mindfulness, pausing to observe the craving without immediately acting on it, creates a gap between impulse and action. This gap is where freedom lives. It's not about suppressing the craving, but about recognizing it as a passing mental event rather than a command you must obey. Breaking the cycle also involves addressing the deeper needs the behavior is trying to meet. Many destructive dopamine habits are coping mechanisms for stress, boredom, loneliness, or anxiety. If you can identify the underlying emotion or need, you can find healthier ways to meet it. Exercise, meaningful social connection, creative expression, or simply resting can provide real relief without the destructive side effects of the quick dopamine hit. It's important to accept that breaking the cycle is rarely a one-time victory. Relapses are common, and they are not proof of failure. Each attempt teaches you something about your triggers, your vulnerabilities, and your strengths. The process is iterative. You notice the pattern, experiment with changes, observe what works, and adjust. Over time, the old pathways weaken, and the new ones become your default. Accountability can accelerate this process. Sharing your goals with a friend, joining a support group, or using tools that track your progress creates an external system of reinforcement. The brain's social wiring is powerful. When others know you're working toward change, you're more likely to stick with it. Finally, focus on the bigger picture. Breaking a dopamine loop is not just about stopping one bad habit. It's about reclaiming your attention, your energy, and your sense of agency. Each victory, however small, is a step toward living intentionally rather than reactively. The cycle loses its grip not when cravings disappear entirely, but when they no longer dictate your actions. The truth is, we can't eliminate dopamine from our lives, and we wouldn't want to. It's what drives us to seek, to explore, to achieve. But we can decide which pursuits deserve our attention and which are stealing it. When we consciously choose our cues, our responses, and our rewards, we take back the steering wheel from the automatic loops that once controlled us. Breaking the cycle is not about denying pleasure. It's about choosing the pleasures that truly serve us.